And he's really a special guy. His career before he started the Giving Back Fund is a very interesting group that takes people who've made a mark in the world and built their own personal brand. Once you've built that brand, you have a lot of influence and power you can bring it to bear on a variety of things. And he tries to help them figure out how to find something they're passionate about, that they really want to make a meaningful difference in, and he helps them do that. Before that, Marc was a professor of Holocaust studies. And it was through this discovery process, he said, I want to go out into the world, not look back to the past, but help to create the future. It's really inspiring. With that, I'll turn it over to Marc Pollick.
Thank you, Rob, very, very much for that kind introduction.
Yes.
I don't have the head for those lights. But let me, first of all, I don't know if it's summit related, but I think I said this when we started the last summer, my little section, that I apologize for having a cough. I'm just getting over a little cough, so if I cough, it's a blanket apology, and we're done with that. I am so honored to be able to moderate this panel with these two extraordinary individuals. You are in for a real treat. And this is a very exciting topic. So any of you who were here yesterday, at the end of the day, if you remember, Jeff Schwartz from Timberland gave this panel a plug. Did you hear him? Okay. If you remember, he summed up yesterday by saying that with everything we're doing here, it's so important to remember the human element and the human contact and how important the human being is in all of this. And I think he was referring to this panel when he made those comments. So let me start by introducing you to Kay. Kay Koplovitz. She's one of the earliest pioneers and visionaries in cable television. She founded USA Network. I would ask that you read both of their bios, which are extraordinary in your program, but let me just pull out a few things that I think are germane to this topic. She was the first woman to head a television network, and for those of you who are sports fans out there like me, her television network really negotiated the first contracts with the NBA and Major League Baseball and the Augusta National Masters Golf Tournament, the U.S. Open, and led to what I think later became ESPN. They probably threw that at gratitude or some stuff.
I actually should remind them of that.
In 1998, President Clinton appointed Kay chair of something called the National Women's Business Council, and she used that platform to launch Springboard Enterprises. Now, I want to open a parenthesis here before I introduce Eric and before we do any questions, and ask Kay if you tell the audience in your own words about Springboard Network. It's very important.
Well, Springboard Enterprises is a venture accelerator for growth businesses that are all led by women. Why did I do that? Is when I was leaving USA Network in the late 90s, looking around at the venture capital market in the United States, which in 1999 was $104 billion being poured into the marketplace. Only 1.7% range of women. Now, having built a multi-billion-dollar business, I said, this is ridiculous. Women can build scalable businesses. We've got to find the right women. And I went around and found out that actually women were connected to the marketplace. So they weren't being rejected, they just weren't connected. So we started an organization called Springboard that selects, trains, and presents women entrepreneurs in growth businesses, technology, digital media, e-commerce, social media, subjects we've touched on today, biotech, like diagnostics, devices, clean tech, green tech, those are the major categories. And we launched in January 2000 with the first 26 companies, 22 of which got funded. Two companies merged. One woman sold her company there, and the other one wasn't funded. So we never stopped, never looked back. We've been going forward ever since. Since that time, we've presented 517 companies, the last 8 in Australia 3 weeks ago. And these companies raise money, 83% of them do. 80% in business today, over 12 years, so I don't think there are too many organizations that can really match that track record. Over a third have had positive liquidity events, including 10 IPOs, 3 IPOs from Israel, by the way. We have 16 companies from Israel. So it's very exciting. These companies have raised $5.6 billion. So what we're really doing is creating the ecosystem around women entrepreneurs and high-growth businesses to compete in the marketplace. And to compete in the marketplace, you've got to have enough of the right kind of capital. So that's a short story. And we go on. You know, women are rising.
You don't do anything small, do you?
I think big. That's my message. I always say look at things. I strive, you don't always succeed, but we'll talk a little bit about that when we get to our subject.
So Kay's left. Let me introduce you to Eric. Do you mind if I call you Kay? I should have asked.
Please,
Can
that's
I
my
call you
name.
Eric? Thank you. Eric has been a corporate CEO of several companies, a venture capitalist, a professor of entrepreneurship. But most germane, perhaps, to this particular panel is he is the founder and chairman of the Israel Venture Network. So let me open that same parenthesis. Before we go to questions, would you tell our audience about the Israel Venture Network?
Sure. It's a great opportunity to be here and to tell a story. We're going on to our 13th year. So we started this as a group of venture philanthropists, both American-based and Israeli-based, focused on this task of helping to close social gaps in Israel, and applying to this all the techniques and mindset and concepts behind venture philanthropy. So a lot of the management techniques, approaches, risk-taking approaches that we developed in our own business, we applied to social causes. And the original founders of IDN basically all come out of the high-tech industry, but this is not just a high-tech network. It's a network of mostly business people who want to make a difference in Israel through active philanthropy. Over the last 10 to 12 years, the primary vehicle that we've used to basically help close social gaps are what we call social enterprises. The social enterprises basically pursues a social mission first and foremost, but it does so through some kind of income generation activity that enables it to be less dependent upon public charity. So social businesses have a much greater sustainability and can really scale and have national impact. Israel is a small country, but yet most NGOs tend to be subcritical mass. So if we can help them get to critical mass and have national impacts, then we're truly fulfilling our own mission. So social enterprises have really been the primary vehicle that we have funded, and we've done more than just funding them. We've injected, of course, financial capital, but just as importantly, we've injected mentorship. The mentors are drawn from our own membership and friends, and we've injected also skill-building components. It's these three components together that have enabled us to achieve success within this portfolio of social enterprises.
I almost don't even need to ask the questions because you and I were talking ahead of time, and Eric just perfectly leads into something that you'd like to say, so please continue on that whole issue of sustainability.
Well, we have twin philosophies, I'm very much in the same camp with Eric, and that is when you travel around and go to a lot of different, talk to people about social entrepreneurship or social philanthropy, it's kind of a big area that people perhaps mean different things when they talk about it, but I definitely come down on the side of sustainability and building viable businesses behind solving social issues and social problems. So very much the same. And the characteristics of people who are successful in these different models that are out there are very much the same as entrepreneurial characteristics. Highly focused, driven to actually make a change, won't give up, can build the A-team, can deliver, and can create a business model that will sustain them. So we have different models that are out there, but I sort of myself come down to the same place that you are, Eric, and that is where I invest my time is in social entrepreneurship, and let's remember that entrepreneurship is really kind of the underlying basis. Socialism modifies the word entrepreneurship. So we sometimes say there's a serial entrepreneur, you know, that's a different use of the word, but still underlying the characteristics that people have to have if they're going to be driven to make a major social change. So philanthropy is terrific, and there are some philanthropic models that work, and we were talking about Teach for America, you know, the Acumen Fund is something else that's out there that, you know, but it's not scalable. The Acumen Fund is not scalable on a large scale. If you want to impact on a global scale, I think you really do have to create a business model behind it with all the attributes of running a profitable business in order to really sustain that business. And I think that's what you were talking about. So that's why I come down on that issue.
Yeah, I think we have very similar philosophies, even though we come from slightly different business backgrounds, but really we believe in the same values of entrepreneurship. And perhaps I could illustrate this with an example that shows how this can work and how patient capital you really have to have in order to get to that point of sustainability. About 10 years ago, a young entrepreneur came to us coming out of a moshav in Israel, with the dream of starting a nationwide recycling movement across the country. And we identified him as a genuine entrepreneur, but he needed coaching. He needed a little bit of capital to seed his venture, and we helped him along the way. His model was this. He taught his the people who lived with him in this moshav had to sort out garbage, had to separate organic garbage from non-organic garbage. And he created a compost farm. Out of this, he created fertilizer. He sold his fertilizers back to the farm. And this started a virtuous cycle. And he spread this from one moshav to the next, across the region, eventually across the nation. 10 years later, this enterprise does not need any more financial capital. It is completely self-sustaining. It produced enough fertilizer and enough income from the sale to fund their own expenses. They employed 26 people out of last year. This company would never have been funded by a bank. It would not have been funded by a venture capitalist. It was a capital formation problem for these kind of enterprises. So IBM plays a role in filling some of this void. And our goal is to propagate this model across various sectors. I gave an example of environments, but I think similar examples could be given in education and economic development and so on and so forth.
That's an interesting example. It leads nicely to the next question I have. For both of you, from the vantage points you've been privileged to have and the positions that you've held, have had the opportunity to see a lot out there, what works, what doesn't work. From everything you can see, is there any movement or organization in venture philanthropy or social entrepreneurship that either of you find really exciting? I mean, you just talked about one, but anything out there, whether it's microfinance or there's just a whole array of things people are trying now. Is there anything that you would think, to your point of view, would be something that we should look forward to?
Well, I think that when you take energy and how there are many people living in more remote areas that don't have access to energy, and yet there are organizations that are teaching people, like the Barefoot campus that is teaching Barefoot College, which is teaching grandmothers, illiterate grandmothers from Africa, to install solar panel energy in their remote villages. They don't even speak the same language. They are taught all by video, something I believe in strongly about the impact of video on people's understanding. And they're taught in India by people who speak none of the languages that the people they're teaching are speaking. So they all do it by video demonstration. They go through a program of 6 months they go back to their villages, they not only install the solar panels and for the first time bring light to their village, but also energy, so they can then sell that energy in small little bits to the villagers there. They can have cell phones, they can have communications that they've never had before, and they can have light, having lived their whole lives without any resource for light or electrical resource. And so, like the project that you just stated, this will evolve into people having a small business in their respective villages. These women who are taught to repair these solar panels if they, get damaged or lost. It's a marvelous up from the disadvantage into today's economy. It's not going to be the growth of the African economy, but it's going to mean a lot to the people that live in the remote villages. And these are in villages in many countries throughout Africa. I just think it's one of the most compelling programs I've seen.
I'm getting goosebumps just listening to you talking about it.
I love the power of these women. No, I just love that, getting energy into their fortitude. I mean, it's hard to imagine being a grandmother in a remote village in Africa, illiterate, and someone comes along and says, we're going to take you on this plane to India. Plane? What? I'm going to go on a plane to India? I'm going to do this? I'm going to live there for 6 months with my family and all my kids. And my grandchildren might be hurt or something might happen. And you do it. And you go out of your comfort zone and you come back with electric gold for your community. I mean, I just blown away.
So Marc, you asked for a few examples of important trends, and you mentioned microloans. That's certainly one trend. But the important thing about microloan is not the fact that these are small loans. It's the fact that they come packaged with mentorship to help the loan recipient make best use of the loan and eventually repay that loan and become self-sufficient. So mentorship is a trend which I think is being completely recognized and formalized. IBM, for example, has a school for mentors to turn business people into good mentors. Not every good business person can be a mentor, but that's one piece of it. Another one that I'll mention, when we talk about social enterprises, social enterprises have been defined in concept, have not always been recognized with a legal status in every government. In Israel, we're working with the Israeli government to help establish a clear definition and recognition of what a social enterprise does. It delivers results in a dimension which is hard to measure. The social reporting scorecard is hard to measure. Nevertheless, there are some social goods that are social values. And along the same line, I mentioned a third example, which is an example of social financing innovation. Some of you have heard about social impact loans. This is basically a loan made by governments or some kind of a public service to the private sector in order to deliver social good. It could be, for example, savings in prison custodial care. It could be child education savings. Basically, the loan is repaid not just financially, but it's repaid through the accrual of social goods by private organizations. Social impact bonds are ways to basically accelerate capital formation to solve really difficult social problems that could not be financed otherwise.
I just want to make a remark about your comments on mentoring, because I believe that human capital is the most important capital in the world. And the reason that our companies at Springboard have the outstanding track record that they do is because of a network of outstanding coaches that we assign very, very specifically to each company and each entrepreneur that stays with them through growth phase, raising funding, and letting them stay on through the liquidity events. But it's the human capital that we all have. We all possess some human capital and how we deploy that. and how we deploy it in solving social issues and problems is equally important to any other way that we deploy it, because the financial capital, we are awash with capital, different kinds of capital. Financial capital, it's in pockets everywhere. But we need the human capital to connect, to motivate people, to connect, to teach, to mentor, to bring the skills to bear. And that's what we preach all the time as Springboard Enterprises. It's the human capital that'll take you where you need to go. So we're on the same page.
You told me in our talk prior that it's the individual that you think is the most important. When you look at a social venture, you want to bet on the individual.
We definitely invest in capital in for-profit companies, invest in individuals first and companies second. I mean, I think everybody that's an investor in this room knows that you invest in individuals first, and it's the same thing with social enterprises, or if you're trying to solve problems, people have to have pretty much the same characteristics to be successful. So we're investing in people that we think can drive, to real success on that. I think the characteristics are very much the same.
Just to expand on this, one thing that we've learned sometimes through trial and errors is that in order to ensure you have really good success a few years out through your social entrepreneurship program, you have to start with extremely rigorous selection. In other words, you have to really have the same kind of stringent criteria of selection as you do in business. Professionally, I'm now a venture capitalist, and I can tell you that I probably see 100 deals for every 5 ventures I like. Eventually, get 1 or 2 accepted. So basically, it's a very low single-digit percent of deals. And pretty much the same laws apply in the world of social entrepreneurs. You have to see lots of them, and you have to resist the temptation simply because they know how to charm you. But you really have to ensure that they have all the skills it takes, and they have a high bar. And you have to get over this bar in order to ensure success downstream. So selection at the outset is the first thing to get right.
In the time we have left, I want to cover two more important points. In the title of our panel, the words venture, philanthropy, and social entrepreneurship are both there. Do both of you feel, or either of you feel, that those are the same thing, or how would you define them, or are they different?
Well, they overlap a great deal, but they're not synonymous. Venture philanthropy connotes risk-taking, very active involvement, connotes clear goals, measurements, evaluation, includes very active oversight of the venture. Now, venture philanthropy is something which can take place at the seed level or at a very late stage level. If you're an entrepreneur, typically you want to start something new. Venture philanthropy is basically a mindset and a set of disciplines that apply at every stage of the enterprise, whether it's at ground level or at late stage. So I would say the terms overlap greatly, but they're not entirely synonymous. I would say that venture philanthropy is something that can apply really from the ground level to a very established non-profit organization or social business. Whereas an entrepreneur really has to have the taste to start something new that's never been done before.
Pretty clear. I think that we do have examples. I think one of my favorites from the United States is because I'm an admirer of John Muir and an excessive user of the national parks, I would say, because I'm a very outdoor person. That here is a person who thought of something that the country, he had a vision for saving the wilderness areas for people to enjoy for generations to come. And it's about into the national park system that is supported by the government and by personal contributions. Sort of the combination of them. So it's totally different. It's something that was a grand scale that really came to fore, and it's totally different than kind of when I talk about social entrepreneurship, I'm talking about entrepreneurship that is meant to solve a particular problem. So I think they're a little bit different, but I think they're just both decent examples of things that can go to the mature level and be sustainable with different kinds of support in the end. But I think we're seeing the evolution, and I see this among young people, and I think maybe, I wonder if you do, because we're trying to know the experience of people like ourselves who have decades of experience with people who are coming up behind us that are enthusiastic about solving problems. And I see at the university level and around the globe, not just in the United States, younger people want to start businesses and they want to do social good while they're doing them. So it's kind of evolution of a model. Not just, I gotta start the next, I gotta be the next. I mean, you could say Google, they have a mission, and they have a mission to connect everybody in the world, it's, I just think there's an evolution of these terms and the terminology, but we certainly have no lack of major problems to solve for the world's population, and entrepreneurs that are looking to do that while they make money doing it. And I think that that's a good evolution.
Last question. Let's assume that every single person in this room sitting here is a social entrepreneur who wants to start a company to solve some social problem. From the wealth and depth of your experience, can you give these social entrepreneurs 2 or 3 tips to help them be successful, that if they were to hire you as consultants, it would cost them a fortune, but they're going to get them free today? Insider tips, how to be successful in starting a social venture.
Well, I would suggest building up on some of the themes we discussed on the panel, that the social entrepreneur has to think about creating an income stream through the venture such that there's more sustainability built into the outset. In other words, just being able to deliver social goods without sustainability is no longer, we're in the 21st century, we have to build a sustainability after creation. The second thing that I would suggest is key ingredients of success is you have to figure out what the metric is. Who is the target population that should receive the social good, and how will you measure progress? In general, we cannot take huge leaps of faith, huge amounts of risk. So you have to be able to demonstrate measurable progress towards an end goal. The mission has to be inspiring, but you have to be able to draw some dots along the way. And at every dot you have to feel that, I'm on track, and therefore I deserve more funding. Or not, I'm making a course correction, and this is why. You cannot have this kind of dialogue unless it's very clear from the outset who you're serving and how you're measuring progress. So these are 2 things that I think are necessary. They're not sufficient, but they're necessary for the social entrepreneur to receive funding and attention and support from certain organizations like ours.
And I would add to that that you should go out and build the network of really top-notch advisors and connect into the communities that you think are really also focused on the type of issue that you're addressing. Because again, going back to the human capital, you can't do this. If you're going to really make a major measurable impact over time, you're not going to do it alone. It's going to be using a vast network of people that can help advance what you are trying to accomplish over time. So it's sort of like drill a well before you need a drink of water. You've got to build your community of support even before you need to make the ask for funding. And I might add that some of these endeavors, for those of you who are social entrepreneurs out there, some of them start with grants, and they're not meant to be NGOs so much, but they are sort of a pilot project to really prove the concept, and that's okay. It's okay to start that way, initially, but you really have to have in mind, okay, my pilot proves out to what I think my issue is that I'm addressing, then what is my plan and what are my measurable benchmarks to get people to continue to invest in my company or my social entrepreneurship? Just what I imagine in a second.
The directions say that each of you are supposed to get a chance to make a final comment or observation. Are we running over? All right. And let's dispense with that, and let me thank you, Kay, and thank you, Eric, for a very
I started the Pollick School about 12 years ago, and there were people like you, I call you lone wolves, at the time, who were bringing the private sector dynamic together with social impact, together with nonprofit, sustainable business models, etc. There were people doing it, but not a whole lot.